Nebraska, a state built on the sweat and spirit of its white pioneer heritage, faces an insidious assault, not from external armies, but from its own leaders who barter sovereignty for corporate profit. On September 2nd, 2025, Secretary of State Robert B. Evnen inked a non-binding Memorandum of Understanding MOU with Kenya's Principal Secretary for Diaspora Affairs, Rosaline Njogu, during a taxpayer-funded trade mission to Nairobi, 8,000 miles from Lincoln's capital. This pact, cloaked in rhetoric of student exchanges and apprenticeships, explicitly targets up to 500 Kenyan truck drivers to fill a fabricated shortage in Nebraska's trucking industry, ignoring thousands of qualified local drivers sidelined by regulatory barriers. Far from an isolated misstep, this MOU was known to other state agencies, including those under Governor Jim Pillen, who only voiced opposition due to the deal's glaring unpopularity and potential to inflame Nebraska voters. This feigned dissent masks a broader complicity. Pillen, former Governor Pete Ricketts, Congressman Don Bacon, billionaire Warren Buffett, and a web of state legislators and agencies have long enabled backdoor labor importation schemes, flooding Nebraska with African and other foreign workers to enrich corporate cronies. This article demands an end to this betrayal, insisting that Evnen and his cohorts face criminal liability as accomplices for any harm, especially to young white women, caused by the immigrants they usher in, dismantling the immunity that shields their corruption. A corporate cabal undermining Nebraska. The MOU is not Evnen's alone. It reflects a systemic betrayal orchestrated by Nebraska's political and corporate elite, who prioritize cheap foreign labor over local workers. Pillen, despite public posturing, profits from undocumented labor in his pork operations, while Ricketts, Bacon, and Buffett leverage their influence to funnel federal subsidies into agribusiness giants like Tyson Foods, JBS, and potentially Werner Enterprises. These entities exploit workers at near-slave wages, suppressing local pay by 30 to 50% and displacing Nebraskans. Evnen, a former labor attorney at Woods and Aiken LLP, is the ideal puppet, a corrupt, oblivious stooge swayed by corporate interests and globalist agendas. State agencies, from the Department of Health and Human Services to economic development boards, are complicit, aware of this MOU and countless other backdoor deals that import Africans and other foreigners under the guise of economic necessity. This is not progress. It's a calculated scheme to erode Nebraska's white, working-class communities for elite enrichment. The legal violations are egregious. The MOU's funding, drawn from taxpayer coffers without proper authorization, violates Nebraska Revised Statute 84-306, constituting felony theft by deception, up to 20 years imprisonment. Evnen's failure to recuse himself, given his corporate ties, breaches Nebraska Revised Statute 49-1493, risking federal bribery charges under 18 United States Code 666, 10 years, triple fines. Facilitating unvetted migration flirts with sedition under Nebraska Constitution Article 1, Section 14. And potential racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations act violations if corporate collusion is proven. Evnen's role in enforcing discredited COVID-19 protocols, lockdowns, masks, and vaccines linked to harms like myocarditis adds charges of reckless endangerment, Nebraska Revised Statute 28-904, up to 1 year per harm, and possible wire fraud, 18 United States Code 1343, for misrepresenting efficacy with federal funds. Devastation wrought by African immigration. Nebraska's small towns bear the scars of prior African influxes, particularly Somalis and Sudanese drawn by meatpacking jobs. Lexington, with 1,500 Somali residents, 15% of its population, grapples with overwhelmed schools, where 10% of students are African-born, requiring ESL programs that divert resources from local children. Cultural clashes, mosque zoning disputes, demands for halal accommodations, fracture community cohesion. Public safety suffers. Federal raids in Omaha uncovered human trafficking rings exploiting African immigrants, while immigration and customs enforcement operations linked some to violent gangs like MS-13. Health systems strain under tuberculosis outbreaks and mental health crises among refugees, taxing Nebraska's limited resources. These disruptions stem from corporate-driven labor schemes, enabled by state agencies aware of their impact yet complicit in their expansion. The MOU's plan to import Kenyan truck drivers escalates these risks. Kenya's traffic fatality rate, 28.2 per 100,000, dwarfs Nebraska's, and incidents like a fatal crash by an untrained Indian immigrant trucker in Florida, August 2025, highlight the peril of foreign drivers on unfamiliar roads. These Kenyans, potentially military-age men with minimal training, lack knowledge of U.S. traffic laws, increasing accident risks on Nebraska's highways. Worse, their cultural disconnect, rooted in anti-Western sentiments from African education systems, threatens social harmony. Nebraskans, especially white Nebraskans who form the state's cultural core, reject these newcomers who arrive 8,000 miles from Nairobi with no ties to our heritage or values. Criminal liability for immigrant crimes. The gravest concern is public safety, particularly for young white women who face heightened risks from unvetted immigrants. Africa's high crime rates, including documented patterns of sexual violence in conflict zones, raise alarms about migrants from regions like Kenya. A 2023 Justice Department report noted elevated violent crime among certain refugee groups in U.S. cities, and Nebraska's trafficking busts confirm these dangers. If any Kenyan or African immigrant enabled by Evnen's MOU, or similar schemes by Ricketts, Pillen, Bacon, Buffett, or state agencies, harms a Nebraskan, especially a young white girl, these officials must face criminal liability as accomplices. This principle extends nationwide. Public officials who facilitate illegal or harmful immigration, shielded by positional immunity, must be held accountable for the crimes their policies enable: rape, assault, trafficking, or worse. This accountability stretches back years, targeting leaders who lied, cheated, and stole their way into office to orchestrate America's invasion. A call for repatriation and retribution. Nebraskans demand an end to this influx and the repatriation of all African immigrants, refugees, workers, or otherwise, to their homelands, echoing Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa vision and modern Ghanaian efforts. They belong in Africa, not Nebraska, where their presence disrupts schools, workplaces, and communities. Equally, we demand the figurative banishment of Evnen, Ricketts, Pillen, Bacon, Buffett, and complicit legislators and agencies. Strip their influence, expose their schemes, and hold them accountable as traitors to Nebraska and America. If they champion foreign labor, let them seek their fortunes in Nairobi, where their charity will find no echo. Conclusion: a reckoning for Nebraska survival. The Nebraska-Kenya MOU is a glaring symbol of a state betrayed by its own leaders who trade heritage for profit and sovereignty for globalist applause. Evnen, backed by a cabal of corporate enablers and complicit state agencies, threatens not just jobs but the safety and identity of Nebraskans. Every crime committed by an immigrant under these schemes, whether a traffic fatality or a violent act, must trigger accomplice liability for Evnen and his cohort. The Back to Africa initiative is a clarion call to reclaim Nebraska from invaders and their enablers. We urge the Nebraska legislature, Attorney General Mike Hilgers, and the FBI's Public Corruption Unit to investigate these crimes, misallocation, bribery, endangerment, and pursue impeachment or prosecution. Nebraskans, particularly its white majority, demand a future free from foreign disruption and elite treachery. Act now to halt this invasion, hold its architects accountable, and protect our daughters from the consequences of their betrayal, or watch our heartland fall to those who value profit over people.